Hello, my dear students. My name is Ankit Sharma, and I welcome you all to the Prime Skills. So, in today's part, we are going to discuss the part 3 of Unit 4, and that is Argumentation Skills and Critical Thinking. Now, this is a very important part of the unit. और जनरली ये वाला पार्ट जो है ये आपको बुक्स में या फिर कहीं पे भी बहुत क्लैरिटी के साथ नहीं मिलता है, तो मैंने इसमें खासी मेहनत की है आप लोगों के लिए. इट्स नियर अबाउट 120 slides. It's not about the quantity, basically it is about the quality. So I will be taking from the very basics, very fundamentals, that what exactly the argumentation skills are, and then we would be talking about the nuances and different nitty-gritties of these argumentation and critical thinking. So let's go. सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल इंटरव्यू स्किल्स, ग्रुप डिस्कशन स्किल्स, ये सब हम अपने पार्ट 1 और पार्ट 2 में डिस्कस कर चुके हैं. यहाँ पे हम यूनिट 4 का जो पार्ट 3 है वो डिस्कस कर रहे हैं, एंड दैट इज आर्गुमेंटेशन स्किल्स. सो लेट्स गो अहेड. सो आर्गुमेंटेशन स्किल्स एंड क्रिटिकल थिंकिंग. सबसे पहले हम आर्गुमेंटेशन स्किल्स के बारे में बात करना शुरू करेंगे. इससे पहले कि हम आर्गुमेंटेशन स्किल्स के ऊपर पहुंचे, हमें उससे पहले काफी सारी चीजें पता होनी चाहिए, कुछ बेसिक्स और फंडामेंटल कॉन्सेप्ट्स हमें पता होने चाहिए. तो आई वुड बी स्टार्टिंग फ्रॉम द वेरी फंडामेंटल्स. ओके, so let's begin now. So number one, the first question arises is, what is discourse? A discourse is spoken or written communication between people, especially serious discussion of a particular subject. So any serious discussion about any topic can be considered to be a discourse. It can be of any subject. Discourse is a formal and intense discussion or debate. It can be a discussion or it can be a debate. Now, what is the basically difference between the discussion and debate? That is going to be very clear in upcoming slides. The noun discourse comes from the Latin discursus, to mean an argument. So discursus Latin का एक word है जिसका meaning होता है argument. But luckily the kind of argument does not mean people fighting or coming to blows. So argument not always means that people are fighting or to just prove their point. So you should not consider that argument is something on which people will always fight. Okay, so argument means a logical discussion. Okay, so the argument in discourse refers to an exchange of ideas, sometimes heated, that often follows a kind of order and give and take between the participants. So it is always a logical type of discussion. 3 ancient arts of discourse. So if you want to do an effective discourse, there are 3 ancient arts of discourse which are also known as trivium. So what are the 3 arts? Grammar, logic, and rhetoric. So if you are discussing something, there should be 3 important characteristics of your discussion. Number 1 is grammar, number 2 is logic, and number 3 is rhetoric. So now what is grammar? Grammar teaches the mechanics of language to the student. This is a step where a student comes to terms defining the object of information perceived by the 5 senses, hence the law of identity. A tree is a tree and not a cat. So what does it mean? Grammar means that the language, or you can say the proficiency in the language, so that you can interpret or so that you can actually codify the things in the desirable intensity, or you can actually you can say communicate the message in a proper way, in a proper language. So if you have a command over language, that is basically which is defined by the grammar. Now coming to the logic, or also known as dialectic. Logic means the mechanics of thought and analysis, the process of composing sound arguments and identifying fallacious arguments and statements, so systematically removing contradictions and thereby producing factual knowledge that can be trusted. Logic means when you give a serious thought to that problem, you analyze the problem or the discourse, and then you give a logical reply to that. That is called basically the logic or dialectic. Okay. Now, third thing is rhetoric. Rhetoric is the application of language in order to instruct and to persuade the listener and reader. So this is basically the skill or articulation, how effectively you put your ideas into words, how effectively you present them so that you can convince, instruct, or persuade the person you are communicating to. So grammar is the art of inventing symbols and combining them to express thoughts. It means grammar is basically an art of simply making the sentences. Logic is art of thinking, and then rhetoric is the art of communicating thought from one mind to another, the adaptation of language to circumstance, right? So grammar jo hai, once again, let me just summarize in a very brief way. Grammar is basically how you construct the sentence. Logic is basically how you think about it, how you analyze the information, and then finally rhetoric is how you communicate that message which you have already thought in your mind and given a serious analysis to. Okay. Grammar is concerned with the thing as it is symbolized, logic is concerned with the thing as it is known, and rhetoric is concerned with the thing as it is communicated. Okay, so this is the another way to put the information into words. Now coming to the basic, or you can say very important aspect of argumentation, that is the rhetoric. So first of all, we need to understand what is rhetoric, and then we would be moving towards the argumentation. Rhetoric is the art of persuasion, which along with grammar and logic is one of the three ancient arts of discourse, which we have already considered. Rhetoric aims to study the techniques writers or speakers utilize to inform, persuade, or motivate particular audiences in a specific situation. See, there are different ways of communication, and there are different purposes or objectives of communication. When you are communicating to motivate or persuade, if you are not rhetorical or if you are not very much articulate, probably your communication would not be effective. Merely knowing the English language or knowing the language of communication does not give you a power to become or authority to become an effective communicator. An effective communicator is far more than being just fluent. It is called articulation, or the ability to effectively put your words into the sentences and then finally persuade or influence the person in front of you. So rhetoric is that art. Rhetoric वो कला है जो आपको वो पावर देती है कि आप सामने वाले व्यक्ति को इन्फ्लुएंस कर सको, परसुएड कर सको, मोटिवेट कर सको. जो मोटिवेशनल स्पीकर्स होते हैं, they are considered to be the rhetorical. Now, Aristotle defines rhetoric as the faculty of observing in any given case the available means of persuasion, which is a combination of the science of logic and the ethical branch of politics. So it is just a little bit of philosophical type of definition. If you want to go through it, it's okay. I'm just including all definitions in order to give you food for thought so that you can write in your examination and you can also understand the concept very well. So if there is one definition which is not resonating with you, please try to avoid it. Don't worry about that. Rhetoric typically provides heuristics. Heuristics means thumb rules. Provide heuristics for understanding, discovering, and developing arguments for particular situation, such as Aristotle's three persuasive audience appeals: logos, pathos, and ethos. These logos, pathos, and ethos are very, very important. If you really want to become a very good communicator, always remember logos, pathos, and ethos are very important for your communication ability. What are these? We are going to discuss in upcoming slides. The 5 canons of rhetoric or phrase of developing a persuasive speech were first codified in classical Rome. What are the 5 canons? There are 5 canons of rhetoric. It means if you really want to become a good communicator, you need to understand the 5 special factors of a public speech or any sort of discourse: invention, arrangement, style, memory, and delivery. Now we are going to discuss about them a little bit. But before that, let's talk about the Aristotle's 3 modes of persuasion. What are the 3 modes of persuasion? Ethos, pathos, and logos. And according to Lord Mancroft, a speech is like a love affair. Any fool can start it, but to end it requires considerable skills. And that's what we are talking about. Communication is not everybody's cup of tea, I'm telling you. Communication really requires a lot of work, a lot of understanding, a lot of ability, and that you can develop only by a lot of practice. Okay, so let's talk about these ethos, pathos, and logos. These are very, very important terms. So first of all, let's talk about the ethos. Ethos is about establishing your authority to speak on a subject. Logos is your logical argument for the point, and pathos is your attempt to sway an audience emotionally. So ethos is about credibility, or your value, or your social stature, or your reputation, whatever you want to call it. Then logos is basically being logical in the argument, having statistics and having some data to support your validations or to support or validate your arguments. And then finally, pathos is basically the emotional appeal, that how emotionally you are connecting or making the rapport with your audience. So there are 3 terms. Whenever you are speaking, always remember, first you need to establish your credibility, whether you are really credible or whether you are really authorized to speak on a subject which you are speaking. Number 2, whether you have data or statistics supporting the propositions which you are making or supporting the statements you are making. And then finally, how you are utilizing the emotional appeal, or whether you are appealing emotionally to your audience. So if these 3 factors are there, your speech is really going to be incredible. Leith, a very popular author on this modes of persuasion, has simply given an example. For example, what would be the example of ethos? Buy my old car because I am Tom Magliozzi. Tom Magliozzi, for example, let's consider Amitabh Bachchan. So suppose Amitabh Bachchan is driving a car. Now what happens if he asks you to buy his car? What will happen? His car will be very much expensive. Not because it's the quality of car. It is because Amitabh Bachchan is having a credibility. He's very popular person. Okay, just like Picasso's painting, although like they're very very simple, or rather I should say we are not able to comprehend them properly, but they're very very expensive. Why? Just because of the credibility of Picasso. So here ethos means credibility, the reputation of the person. Logos means, now the example of logos can be buy my old car because yours is broken and mine is the only one on sale. So this is a logic. By logic, I'm telling you that you don't have any car and I have the car, but I want to sell it, and you are the only person who can buy it, or I am the only person who can sell it. So according to the logic, or in a logical way, you should buy it. Now coming to the pathos, buy my old car, or this cute little kitten afflicted with a rare degenerative disease will expire in agony, for my car is the last asset I have in the world and I'm selling it to pay for Kitty's medical treatment. So now what will happen? Here the person is saying you should buy this car because I am selling this car to arrange the money for the treatment of this kitten, otherwise it will die. So now here is an emotional appeal. The person is emotionally blackmailing you or emotionally charging you to take an action. That is called pathos, where you are utilizing the emotions. So you will see that these are the approaches which modern marketing is utilizing in promoting their products. So every time whenever you buy a product, you are always influenced by some sort of ethos, logos, or pathos. Okay, advertisement agencies and the marketing entirely depends upon ethos, logos, and pathos. You will see it. So now let's talk about ethos a little bit. Appealing to the ethos is all about using credibility, either your own as a speaker writer or of your sources, in order to be persuasive. It means या तो आप खुद की अपनी अथॉरिटी यूज करें या फिर आप किसी और की अथॉरिटी यूज करें. किसी और की अथॉरिटी को यूज करने का मतलब क्या है? फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अगर मैं बात करूं नवरत्न तेल की, सो नवरत्न तेल जो होता है उसकी खुद की कोई अथॉरिटी नहीं थी, तो उन्होंने अमिताभ बच्चन से एडवर्टीजमेंट कराया. सो अमिताभ बच्चन की जो क्रेडिबिलिटी थी वो नवरत्न प्रोडक्ट को प्रमोट करने के लिए यूज की गई. ठीक है, तो इससे क्या हुआ कि वहां पे हमने ईथोस का फैक्टर डाला, तो अमिताभ की क्रेडिबिलिटी, अमिताभ बच्चन जी की क्रेडिबिलिटी जो है वो नवरत्न तेल के लिए यूज की गई. Essentially, ethos is about believability. Believability means how much can you believe on the person who is speaking. Will your audience find you believable or trustworthy? आपके जो ऑडियंस हैं, क्या उनको लगता है कि आप पे विश्वास किया जा सकता है? What can you do to ensure that they do? और आप उसके लिए क्या कर सकते हैं? आप अपनी क्रेडिबिलिटी को कैसे बढ़ा सकते हैं? You can establish ethos or credibility in two basic ways. You can use or build your own credibility on a topic, or you can use credible sources, which in turn builds your credibility as a writer or a speaker. Now, what does it mean? For example, if I'm telling you, if I'm just giving you an information. Now, this information, either I should be credible enough. It means I am considered to be the master of that subject. Only then you will believe me. Otherwise, I will simply tell you that where I have taken this information from. So if I say that this information has been taken from government official documentation, then probably it will add some credibility to it. So what does it mean? It means either you use your own credibility. आप अपनी क्रेडिबिलिटी कैसे बनाते हैं? जब आप बहुत पॉपुलर होते हैं, आप सोशल मीडिया पे होते हैं, या फिर आप बहुत ही रेप्यूटेड फिगर है, बहुत ही नोटेड फिगर है, आपके बहुत इंटरव्यूज हुए हैं, तो तब आप एक क्रेडिबल अथॉरिटी बन जाते हैं. या फिर अगर आप क्रेडिबल अथॉरिटी नहीं है, तो आपको वहां पे रिसोर्सेज या फिर रेफरेंसेस प्रोवाइड करने चाहिए, जिससे कि आपकी क्रेडिबिलिटी वहां पे थोड़ी सी स्ट्रांग हो जाए. ठीक है, credibility is extremely important in building an argument. So even if you don't have a lot of built-in credibility or experience with the topic, it's important for you to work on credibility by integrating the credibility of others into the argument. It means credibility of others means, as I already gave the example of Amitabh Bachchan. So you should always try to use the credibility of some person or something, at least, in order to become credible, or in order to use this ethos in your communication. Aristotle argued that ethos was the most powerful of the modes of persuasion, and while you may disagree, you can't discount its power. It means ऐसा हो सकता है कि आपके पास credible sources ना हो, तो आप इसको पूरी तरह से avoid या ignore करने की कोशिश करें, but you can't do that. It is very very important. After all, think about the way advertisers use ethos to get us to purchase product. Taylor Swift sells his perfume and MS Dhoni sells his Team 11. But it's rather their fame and name they are selling. So as I already gave the example, if Mahendra Singh Dhoni is telling you or just selling you the Team 11, okay, so Team 11 is not having any authority, but Mahendra Singh Dhoni's name is giving it the credibility, and that's why people are actually going for it. With the power of ethos in mind, here are some strategies you can use to help build your ethos in your argument. For example, if you have a specific experience or education related to your issues, mention it in some way. For example, if you are an IITian or if you are a person who has completed his education from the foreign university, people will consider you more credible. So if you really have a good education, good certification, good diploma, good experience, please mention it in the very beginning. If you don't have a specific experience or education related to the issue, make sure you find sources from others who do. When you integrate that source of information, it's best if you can address the credibility of your sources. It means always try to attach somebody else's authority with you. For example, you can say this thing, I have been continuously working with IITians and NITians for last 10 years. Although I am not an IITian, I'm not saying so, but again, I'm working with them. It means I'm using the credibility of those people. Use a tone of voice that is appropriate to your writing, speaking situation and will make you sound reasonable and credible as a writer or speaker. The tone of voice is very, very important. So if you are using a tone of voice that is very meek and that is very, you can say, low, probably it would not sound confident and it would not give you credibility. So in order to give yourself a credibility, make sure that you are sounding confident. Pathos. Now we are coming to pathos. So ethos is very much clear. Ethos means that you need to use credibility. You need to establish your credibility. If your credibility is not enough, then you can use the credibility of other people or other things as a source. Now coming to pathos. Pathos is about appealing to your audience emotions. So whenever you are talking about emotions, emotions means like when you are touching people at their heart, rather I should say, when you are touching people emotionally, that is called pathos. Because people can be easily moved by their emotions, pathos is a powerful mode of persuasion. In today's world, pathos really create a very, very important element of any sort of promotion. So whenever you are watching an advertisement, and if this advertisement is somehow related to the family values, the love, the care of parents, the care of kids, then probably you would definitely be running after it and you would be buying that product. So all those marketers, all those people who are creating these promotional activities are actually working upon the pathos. They want to tap you emotionally. So when you think about appealing to pathos, you should consider all of the potential emotions people experiencing, like humor, joy, sympathy, love, frustration, anger, disgust, and sadness. Any of the emotion you can utilize, and then you can be persuasive. It's important, however, to be careful when appealing to pathos and argument with an overly strong focus on emotion are not considered as credible in an academic setting. An overly emotional argument can cause you loss on your credibility as a writer or speaker. Now, suppose like you are very much credible. You have been working with IITians and all the global CEOs for last 10 years, but your emotions got overflowed. It means you started having tears in your eyes while speaking. Now your credibility will be lost. Try to understand pathos, ethos, and logos should be in balanced amount. So there is a Venn diagram in which three circles are there: ethos, pathos, and logos, and the intersecting sections of all three circles is considered to be the sweet spot, right? So you need to understand that. You need to be there. A little bit of ethos, a little bit of pathos, a little bit of logos, and you become an invincible or an extremely persuasive speaker. Okay. In fact, many commercials you see on television or on the internet focus primarily on pathos. For example, many car commercials tap into our desire to feel special or important. Now try to understand why you buy a BMW or Volkswagen, why you buy a Mercedes. What is the difference between a Mercedes and a Scorpio? What is the difference between a Mercedes and a Maruti Swift Desire? There are no specific, or you can say like, although there can be a little bit technical differences, of course, but there is a value. Talk to people. I mean, like there are two people, one is using Apple iPhone and another person is using just Motorola. The person who is using Apple iPhone would be considering himself better than the person who is using Motorola. Why? Because there is a sense of emotion, or there is a sense of feeling special. If you are using iPhone, it means you feel yourself a special person, a person of a higher social hierarchy. So that is what people are actually doing in order to promote their product. They suggest that if you drive a nice car, you will automatically be respected. Now try to understand if somebody's like simply deboarding from their Mercedes, they are simply coming out of their newly purchased Mercedes, probably you would be feeling more respectful towards them. Okay, everybody will just come running and they would be just coming to him to welcome him and all. So it happens, and that is called pathos. So pathos means emotional, you can say emotional appeal. And then finally we are coming to logos. Logos is about appealing to your audience logical side. Now there are like educated people, if we people are all educated, and whenever we want to believe in information, we always want logic or some sort of a statistics or data supporting it. Okay, so logos is basically that data, that logic which you are giving to validate your ideas, to validate your points. So if you are making a proposition that India's education system is not up to the mark, now you need to give the logic, you need to give the data to support that statement. You must think about what makes sense to your audience and use that as you build your argument. What your audience are thinking, you need to just tap on that also. As a writer or speaker, we appeal to logos by presenting a line of reasoning in our arguments that is logical and clear. We use evidence such as statistics and information when we appeal to logos. So in order to appeal to logos, what you need to do, use data, crisp data, very much accurate, and the statistics pointing towards, or you can say supporting your evidence, supporting your argument, then probably you can use the power of logos. Appeals to logos are an important part of academic writing, especially in academic writing. Logos, or you can say this logical side, is very, very important. Okay, statistics and data is very much respected in academic setting, but you will see them in commercials as well. Although they more commonly use pathos and ethos, advertisers will sometimes use logos to sell the product. If somebody is telling you a lot of data and statistics, that Mercedes is being sold in so many different countries, and it's having such a wonderful performance, and like it's having such torque and having such an engine performance and all. So all these statistics and parameters which they are telling you, they are just logos. Okay. For example, commercial based on saving consumers money, such as car commercial that focus on miles per gallon, are appealing to the consumer's sense of logos. Okay, so if somebody is telling you that this car is having a lot of mileage, a good mileage, then probably they are tapping, or they are simply appealing to the logos of the consumers. So these were the ethos, pathos, and logos, and these are very, very important. So now we are coming to the 5 canons of rhetoric. What are the 5 canons of rhetoric? Invento or invention, dispositio or arrangement, style, memory, and delivery. So what does it mean? So whenever you want to deliver a presentation, or whenever you want to deliver a specific sort of information to somebody, all these 5 points are very, very important. Okay, invention, arrangement, style, memory, and delivery. So what is the meaning of invention? The process of developing argument. Arrangement means organizing the argument for extreme effect. Style means determining how to present the argument. Memory means the process of learning and memorizing the speech and persuasive message. And finally, delivery means the gestures, pronunciation, tone, pace when used while presenting the persuasive argument. So first of all, you need to invent the points which you want to speak. Then you need to arrange or organize them into a proper order. Then there should be a style of speaking. And you need to memorize the specific points. If you don't memorize the specific points, probably you would not be able to deliver them. And then finally, you need to understand that how to deliver it, how to be articulate about it. You need to be rhetorical about it. Okay. Now, rhetorical modes or modes of discourse. There are 4 modes of discourse, which are narration, description, exposition, and argumentation. And these are the important part of your chapter. So we would start from the argumentation first. What is argumentation? Argumentation is a very logical way of discussing or debating an idea. When you use the technique of argumentation, you prove something to be true or false. So it means if you really want to make your point, if you want to prove yourself right or somebody else wrong, then you are into the argumentation. So putting your point, then somebody else is putting his point. You are putting a rebuttal, somebody else is putting the rebuttal against you. In this way, there is an argument which keeps on rising. Argumentation uses logic, persuasion and various debate tactics to arrive at the conclusion. Argumentation में हमेशा logic भी होते हैं, persuasion techniques होती हैं, debate की techniques होती हैं, and only then you would be able to complete the argumentation process. When a debater or negotiator follows the rules of argumentation, he backs up her ideas with very systematic, careful reasoning that makes her conclusions strong and believable. So it means argumentation doesn't mean that you are arguing without any reason, okay, and you are fighting with each other and you are telling that no, you are wrong, I am right. No, there should be a proper logic. Whenever you are making a point, there should be a valid reason behind that, and you should justify it or validate it with a proper reason or evidence. Okay, that is how an argumentation proceeds. From the 15th century, argumentation has meant presentation of formal argument from the Latin root argumentationum, the bringing forth of a proof. It means argument का meaning ही जो fundamental meaning है वो है proof को सामने लेके आना और evidence को सामने लेके आना. Argumentation is the interdisciplinary study of how conclusions can be reached from premises through logical reasoning. Okay, so like these are the different definitions which you can just like one or two which you can remember or which you can keep in mind so that you can write in the examination, and also you can understand when you just read lot many definitions, you actually understand the meaning from different perspectives. And that's why I have included almost every definition of argumentation so that you can understand it from different directions, different perspectives, and you can have your own view of argumentation. It includes the arts and science of civil debate, dialogue, conversation, and persuasion. So basically, argumentation can be a debate, it can be a dialogue, it can be a simple conversation, or it can be a persuasion device too. Argumentation includes deliberation and negotiation, which are concerned with the collaborative decision-making procedures. So whenever you are negotiating or deliberating, even then you are argumenting. It also encompasses eristic dialogue, the branch of social debate in which victory over an opponent is the primary goal, and didactic dialogue, a teaching method that follows a consistent scientific approach or educational style to present information to students for teaching. So now there are two approaches of argumentation, eristic dialogue और डायरेक्टिक डायलॉग. एरिस्टिक डायलॉग मींस आपका मेजर पर्पस ये है कि आप सामने वाले व्यक्ति को केवल हराएं. आर्ग्यूमेंटेशन में आप उसको डिफीट करें. Okay, so if you are defeating the person, if your sole purpose is to just defeat the person in front of you in argumentation, then it is called the eristic dialogue. And then comes the didactic dialogue. Didactic means when a teacher is communicating with a student. So if a student is asking a question, teacher will not try to pacify it or simply you can say ignore it or simply try to defeat it. He will logically solve it in order to answer the question of student. So that is called didactic dialogue. Didactic dialogue is always considered to be the most important and most comprehensive one. What is argumentation? Once again, argumentations are claims backed by the reason that are supported by evidence. There are 5 highly relevant characteristics of argumentation. Now, somebody can ask you what are the characteristics of argument? These are here. Argumentation is a social process. Now, always try to understand if you are alone, you cannot argument. Okay, although self-argumentation can also be a proper method for thinking rationally, but again we are here concerned with the argumentation as a social process only, so there should be at least 2 or more than 2 people for argumentation. Now coming to argumentation is a listener and audience oriented activity, even if the audience is just one person. So in order to argument, you need to understand and listen to audience properly. If you are the only one who is speaking, of course there would not be any argument. So argument will always be depending upon the audience point of view also. Argument is an art. As an art, argument has techniques and general principles. Therefore, it is a learned craft. So argument is an art, and every art requires learning and practice. So if nobody is very much skilled from the very beginning or from birth. So we always need to understand the art of or learn the art of argumentation. Argument involves contested issues. So if there is a contested issue, or you can say if there are 2 opposite sides, only then the argumentation can occur. If both people are speaking in the same direction, then probably no argument will occur. Argument fills much of our lives. So no matter where we are, the argument will always be there. You will have to, like whenever there are 2 people, they both are representing or they both are actually giving their own views. So what will happen? One person will definitely persuade another one. Otherwise, there would not be any solution. So argumentation is everywhere. Why argumentation? Now, what is the reason of argumentation? Why exactly argumentation is required? So people argue for 4 main reasons. Number 1, to clarify thinking as individual or group. So suppose like your teacher is telling you something and you don't understand it. What do you need to do? You will simply asking a question. Now teacher gives the answer, but you are not satisfied. Then you will again ask a question. The teacher again gives you the answer, but you are still not satisfied. You will again ask a question. So that is basically the argumentation. So what you are doing here, you are trying to clarify thinking as an individual. The same thing can happen with anybody from the class or maybe a group also. So first reason of argumentation is to clarify thinking. Number two, explain or defend actions or belief. So now suppose like you are in favor of a particular political party. Now there are some other people who are against that political party. Now at a time it happens that you confront each other. What will happen? That person will give claim against the political party you are in favor of, but then you will be giving claims in favor of that political party which you are in favor of. So what will happen? There would definitely be different arguments from your side, from his side, from your side, from his side, and it will keep on continuing. So in the end, there would be some sort of conclusion, but although these type of debates don't have a conclusion until and unless they are very much logical in nature. So to explain or defend actions or belief, you are defending your belief, so that is also a part of argument, and that's why you are argumenting. Why? Because you want to defend your belief. To solve problems or make judgment. Now, whenever you are talking about a professional arrangement or an organizational arrangement, the argumentation is a very important part. Why? Because if you want to solve a problem, in order to do that, you need to have different perspectives from different people, some contrary thoughts. Only then you will be able to come up with a particular and effective solution. And to have fun. Whenever we want to just have fun, so argumentation is a very fun activity, but you need to understand that argument should be in a proper order or in a proper fashion. If you are not doing argument in a proper order or proper fashion or according to the logics, the argument can be a hot exchange also. It can be very heated and it can convert into a sort of violent or very, you can say, frustrating sort of argument also. So we need to understand, if we follow the rules, only then the argumentation can be fun. Otherwise, it's no fun. Difference between argument and logic. Some people actually don't have the understanding of difference between argument and logic. So let's try to understand it. Argument is fundamentally a communicative exercise where logic is a more philosophical endeavor that does not champion persuasion as a primary goal. So logic is just one aspect of communication, but argument in itself is a complete communication. So in order to do the argument, you would be requiring certain evidences, and those evidences, if they make sense to the specific standard, or if they make sense to all the people or universally, they are considered to be logic. Okay, so logic is something which proves a statement or which actually gives the proper evidence to the statement. For one to be persuaded of a belief or action, they must find the arguer's argument compelling. If you want to persuade somebody, your argument must be compelling. Your argument must be convincing enough in order to convince the another person. Only then you would be able to persuade him. This requires audience adaptation and development of credibility in addition to the developing good reasonable claims and supporting reasons. And once again, if you want to be persuasive, I already told you Aristotle's 3 persuasive approaches, or you can say 3 elements of persuasion: ethos, pathos, and logos. If you really want to be persuasive, you need to have all the 3 things under your command. Argument requires audience adaptation. An argument will always require an audience adaptation. Means audience will take it in his way and then finally he will approve whether the argument is correct or not. Professionals are more likely to want polished, analytical, logical presentations, whereas protesters are more likely to want highly charged emotional arguments that rallies moral indignation of their causes. So this is just an example. Argument requires establishing credibility. If you want to do an argument, always remember, if you do not have a credibility, nobody will listen to you. Okay, if Pradhan Mantri Modi comes on the radio and he tells Man Ki Baat, everybody all over India, every single person listens to it. Okay, but if I start doing it and if I don't have any authority, if nobody knows me, nobody will listen to me. Okay, so like there's an example also. There's a story of Joshua Bell. Joshua Bell is a very popular musician. Now what happened, he actually charges very much or high, or rather I should say he is very expensive. So when he plays the music, he actually charges very high. Now what happened, in a social experiment, he was asked to stand on the railway station. Nobody knew him, nobody knew that he is Joshua Bell, and he started playing the same piece which he used to play or which he used to charge for a very high sum. And he started playing it on the railway station. And then they started counting that, okay, how many people actually pay for the talent rather than the credibility. So end of the day, there were only near about $50 when people actually donated him. So a person who charges millions of dollars for one piece, when he was playing the same piece on the railway station, nobody was able to do it. Nobody was able to just give him even a single penny. They were not even bothering to just give him at least $100 each. Everybody was just like simply throwing $1, $2, or like that only, out of courtesy or out of just, a feeling of helping. So what I mean to say here is that there at the railway station, there was no credibility of Joshua Bell. But when he was in the you can say music theater, or when he was playing in front of thousands of people, there was a credibility associated with him. So credibility is very much required in argumentation. So now coming to components of argument. What are the components of argument? Whenever you are talking about argument, there are 4 components: claim, reason, support, and warrant. So if you want to become very good in argument, you need to understand that what should be the structure of argument. Okay, so let's discuss about them also. What are claims? Claims are statements about what is true or good or about what should be done or believed. It means जो भी आप विश्वास करते हैं, जो भी आप बात बोलते हैं, जो भी कुछ आप ऐसी एक आर्ग्यूमेंटेबल बात बोलते हैं जिसके ऊपर सामने वाला व्यक्ति डिसएग्री कर सकता है, वो आपका क्लेम कहलाता है. ओके, क्लेम्स आर पोटेंशियली आर्ग्यूएबल. नाउ दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. इफ a point is not arguable, that is not a claim. For example, if I say I don't like reading, nobody can claim against it. Nobody can do the argument against it. सामने वाला ये नहीं बोल सकता नहीं तुम्हें पसंद है, ऐसा हो ही नहीं सकता. ये मेरी पसंद है, मैं अपनी बात कर रहा हूँ. So you can't argue on that. But if you say a liberal arts education prepares a student better than other forms of education, now this is arguable. Somebody can say this thing, you are wrong. I believe that science education is more important than the liberal art. So it means that if there is a statement which can be argued in 2 different directions or from 2 different directions, that is basically called a claim. Okay, what are the reasons? Reasons are the statements that support the given claim. Now suppose I have just given the claim. Let's take an example: education system in India. Okay, so I say that education system in India is the best among all the education systems in the world, and there is some other person who says education system in India is absolutely rubbish or it should be completely scrapped. Okay, so now there would be some reasons which will be given in favor and against. So I would be giving in favor of you can say my statement that education system is the best among the world, that education system in India is providing so much employment to the people. So this is just one reason. Although it's right or wrong, it's based on our discretion. But what I'm saying is the reason which I'm giving in support of my statement, my claim, that is called the reason, the validation which I'm giving. The reasons are answers to the hypothetical challenges. Why do you say that? For example, if I'm saying that education system is the best, somebody from front side can say this thing, why do you say that? So whatever answer I would be giving, that would be the justification, or that would be the reason. Reasons can be linked most often, not explicitly, to claim with the word because. So whenever you are answering any question with word because, that is basically the reason. Number 2 is support. So what is support? Support substantiates the reasons offered and helps compel audiences to accept an advanced claim. So now मेरे पास एक स्टेटमेंट था, ठीक है, एक क्लेम था, उस क्लेम को सपोर्ट करने के लिए मैंने एक रीजन दिया. अब उस रीजन को सपोर्ट करने के लिए मुझे एक सपोर्ट यानी मुझे एक स्टैटिस्टिक या फिर मुझे एक डेटा देना होगा, जिसको हम लोगोज भी बोलते हैं, जो मेरी लोगोज को अपील करेगा. तो वो चीज बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट होती है, वो कहलाता है आपका सपोर्ट. दिस यूजुअली कम्स इन फॉर्म ऑफ एविडेंस. यू नीड टू गिव एन एविडेंस. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, आई कैन गिव एन एविडेंस अकॉर्डिंग टू द वर्ल्ड इकोनॉमिक फोरम. According to the report of the World Economic Forum, Indian education system comes on the 27th place in all over the world, which is considered to be the very good rank. So that is a support. Evidence offers challenges and support to the reasons given. So this basically is a support to the reason which we have given in support of claim. Evidence comes in various forms, including specific example, statistic, data, testimonies, narratives, just a little few. And then coming to the finally warrant. Warrant are the inferences or assumptions that connect the support to the claim. Warrants often answer the question, what do you have to believe in order to believe that the support justifies the claim or reason being made? This seems to be a little bit difficult sentence, but the thing is, warrant are basically the relationship between the claim, the first statement, and then finally the validations which you are providing in the third step. Okay. If a reason given to justify a liberal education is improvement of critical thinking, then the implicit assumption or warrant is that critical thinking is good, right? So what does it mean? That दोनों जब पूरे के पूरे स्टेटमेंट को सुना, आपने क्लेम को सुना, क्लेम के बाद रीजन को सुना और रीजन के बाद सपोर्ट को सुना, तो उसके बाद आपके मन में जो फाइनली एक थॉट निकल के आएगा, दैट विल बी नोन एज योर वारंट. Warrants are often assumed and rarely articulated which can make them difficult to detect. So warrants cannot be communicated, rather they can be made in mind. So ultimately, whenever you reach a decision, that is basically the warrant. For example, the claim can be recent tax cuts should be abandoned. The reason can be because they only benefit the rich. And what can be the support? Statistics show that the majority of the tax cuts are targeted at upper middle class and upper class families, not poor families and individuals. And finally, what would be the warrant or the conclusion? Tax cuts that only benefit the rich are unfair. So this is the basic structure of an argument, or these are the four components of argument. Types of dialogue in arguments. So now there can be different types of dialogues in argument. In its most common form, argumentation involves an individual and an interlocutor or opponent engaged in dialogue, each contending different positions and trying to persuade each other. But there are various types of dialogues. So dialogue में हमेशा दो लोग होते हैं, एक तो जो व्यक्ति, एक suppose like you can be an individual and there should be a contender, basically a person who is also known as interlocutor or an opponent. So what are the types of dialogue? Number one, they can be persuasive dialogues. What are the meaning of persuasive dialogues? It aims to resolve conflicting points of the view of different positions. So if there are two different positions, persuasion dialogue will be having a sole objective of resolving the conflict. Number two is negotiation, which aims to resolve conflict of interest by cooperation and deal making. Negotiation means, suppose like there are salary negotiations. So if you are going to an organization, the employer would be offering you suppose 50k and you are in favor of getting yourself 55k, then you would be negotiating. Even the employer would also be negotiating, and then finally you will coming to a consensus. Okay. Then inquiry aims to resolve general ignorance by the growth of knowledge. So inquiry is just like asking question between teacher and student. A student is asking lot many questions. That is another type of argument. Deliberation aims to resolve a need to take action by reaching a decision. So deliberation means like whenever there is a deliberation, so we need to take a decision about taking an action. So for example, there can be a deliberation of like ambassadors of different countries to take an action against the Russia or take an action against any specific country. Information seeking aims to reduce one party's ignorance by requesting information from another party that is in position to know something. So now information seeking means like it is just another form of the inquiry only, but information seeking can be a little bit more detailed. And then finally, heuristic aims to resolve a situation of antagonism through verbal fighting. Heuristic means like there's a like verbal fighting between two people or two parties in order to prove their point or in order to defeat the opponent. The structure of argument. Now, what is the structure of argument? Logic is a science of reasoning, proof, thinking, or inference. We know that. Logic ladders examine the piece of reasoning or a thought and determine whether it is correct or not. The building block of logic arguments is propositions. Like whenever you're talking about the logical argument, the building block of them are known as proposition, also called statements. A proposition is a statement which is either true or false. For example, Washington DC is the capital of United States. Okay, so this can be a proposition. It can be true also, it can be false also. That will depend upon the evidences produced and finally to the warrant. An argument is a connected series of statements that create a logical, clear and defined statement. So argument is basically various logical statements combined together. There are three stages to creating a logical argument. So if you talk about the structure of argument, there are three stages. Number one, premise. Number two, inference. And number three, conclusion. So let's talk about the stage one, premise. What is the premise? The premise defines the evidence or the reasons that exist for proving a statement. Premise often starts with words like because, since, obviously, and so on. So like whenever you are giving a claim, then you would be giving the premise. Premise means which is basically it is the another name to the reason only. Stage 2, inference. In this stage, we take one or more statements that are agreed upon as true and come up with a new statement. So here we combine two statements which are already agreed upon and then finally we come to a conclusion or integrating them to a one statement. That is called the inference. Inference means एक तरीके से समझ लीजिए कि आपने ऐसे क्या समझा, ठीक है, तो आपका उसका gist या उसकी जो summary निकल के आती है, that is called inference. And then finally comes the conclusion. The conclusion of an argument is a final statement. The conclusion is often stated as a final stage of inference. So this is basically the final summary or the final understanding which you actually got completely. Its validity or truth is confirmed by the truth of premise statement and the inference statement. Conclusion use the words like therefore, it follows that, in conclusion, hence, and like all that. Okay, so this is called the conclusion stage. So this is the structure of argument: premise, inference, and conclusion. So here is an example also, the logical argument type. What can be the premise statement? Washington DC is the capital of United States. The President of United States lives in the White House. The White House is at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington DC. So these are the three premises. Now what will happen? You will make the inference statement. You will combine all the three statements to just give some certain sort of specific one or two statements. For example, these statements imply that White House is located in Washington DC, and then these statements also imply that President live in Washington DC by living in the White House. Now what will be the final conclusion? Now integrate all of them and just make one statement. Therefore, the President of United States lives in the capital of United States. That is the final statement. Okay. So premise, inference, and conclusion. Types of argumentation. Now there can be different types of argumentation. So here only 9 types of arguments we will be discussing about, right? So number 1 is the casual argument. A casual argument is the type of argument used to persuade someone or the group of people that one thing has caused something. This type of argument focuses on how something occurred and how a problem arose as a result of the occurrence. So it can be simple argument, like you are having with your family, you are having with your friends. That is called a casual argument, where you tell something and then you tell why exactly that happened. Okay. This argument is important because it helps people determine the reasons why certain things happen and make clear the cause to ensure it doesn't happen again. So it basically tell you a specific example, specific statement, and then why it happened, and then how exactly to stop it happening from, or how exactly to make it happen again. It depends upon the situation. That is called the casual argument. Then comes the rebuttal argument. Rebuttal means when you are giving an opposition argument, or when you are simply trying to convince or persuade another person who is in opposition. A rebuttal argument is centered, I'm sorry, the spelling of centered is a little bit mistaken here. The rebuttal argument is centered on refuting an idea or belief that has been present up until this point in time. This type of argument often involves including why a particular idea or belief is flawed and how you feel it can be fixed or changed. So it means, like, suppose there is a certain belief that people always take an education system as a boon to Indian society. But now I want to just challenge this situation, or I want to challenge this statement. So I'll have to give certain evidences in opposition to that. In order to do it, I need to make certain rebuttal argument, and that is called the opposition, or you can say challenging argument. Okay. To challenge the status quo of any statement or any situation, you simply make rebuttal arguments. Most rebuttal arguments include a statement of counter-argument, a statement regarding your position and how it is different from the counter-argument, and evidence to support your position. So rebuttal arguments are generally oppositional in nature. They will always give certain sort of evidences and certain sort of valid thoughts. Number 3 is the proposal argument. A proposal argument is one in which a person proposes a particular solution to a specific issue. So suppose, like, you are having a problem, I'll propose a solution. Then you will simply rebuttal my solution. I'll simply again give you another solution, or maybe like modified one. Then you will simply ask me again a question. I'll give you another answer. That is called a proposal argument. So I'll be proposing you every time a new solution, a modified solution or an adapted solution. This argument should include the establishment of a problem, the details of the proposal, and reasons why the proposal is a good idea. So whenever you are giving a proposal, you will simply give a proposal first, then you will tell the details of the proposal, and then finally why exactly this proposal is unique or like far better than other proposals. For example, an employee may make a proposal argument that proposes a new way to increase customer retention rates. So there can be any problem to which you can propose a solution. Now coming to the evaluation argument. An evaluation argument is an argument that is used to evaluate whether a particular element is good or bad. So if you are evaluating an argument and then giving evidences in favor or against that, that is called an evaluation argument. For this argument to work, those participating in the argument must first come to an agreement as a criteria of good or bad. So you need to understand what is good and what is bad. Only then you would be able to favor good or favor bad. For example, you may make a list of most widely recognized standards or protocols for judging a particular issue. Okay, so like there can be other different problems too. Then comes the narrative argument. A narrative argument is an argument in which an individual states their case by telling a story that illustrates a point directly related to the argument. So narration is somehow very much related to story only. So when you are telling a story, or then you are argumenting about something, that is basically called the narrative argument. Unlike other arguments which rely solely on figures and facts, narrative arguments allow individuals to use a narrative to express their stance on a particular issue. So for example, if you're giving an example of like anything and then you're utilizing a historical example or historical anecdote in order to prove your point, then probably it would be a narrative argument. For example, an employee may describe their experience with another company's customer service representatives to make a stance on a change the employee wants to making their own company's customer service approach. So in order to provide a solution to my current or existing company, I would be giving an example of the previous company where my previous company actually took a step and it actually came out with the flying colors. So I can narrate a story in order to make them understand that what can be the possible approach. Then comes the modern American argument. What is modern American argument? As a teaching tool, these arguments are often about students learning to support claim with evidence. So like whenever you want to make an argument, these are the different approaches of arguments basically. So if you want to make an argument, you need to follow this approach. For example, first of all, give the introduction. Try to give the introduction of the problem or the situation which you're talking about. Give point number 1 in evidence or in support of that. First claim and support. Point number 2, second claim and then support it. Point number 3, third claim and then support it, and conclusion, implications or the future and the real restate the thesis. So this should be the structure. So whenever you are speaking about anything, so speak about that thing for the like in the introduction part, then give first evidence, its support, second evidence, its support, third evidence, its support, and then finally the conclusion. This type of argument is readily adaptable in terms of size, argument, and application, but it is not the only option available. There can be different other options too. For example, classical or Aristotelian argument. The Aristotelian or classical argument is a style of argument developed by the famous Greek philosopher or rhetorician Aristotle. In this style of argument, your goal as a writer speaker is to convince your audience of something. So whenever you want to convince somebody for something, you will be utilizing these type of arguments, which is known as classical argument. The goal is to use a series of strategies to persuade your audience to adopt your side of the issue. Although ethos, pathos, and logos play a role in the argument, this style of argument utilizes them in the most persuasive ways possible. So Aristotle's three persuasive elements or three elements of persuasions were ethos, pathos, and logos. So whenever you are using the classical argument, you would be using all these three in a very big or comprehensive way. So like what are the 5 main parts of the classical or Aristotelian argument? Number 1, introduction. So you introduce your issue. Number 2, narration. You will be narrating a story. Okay, narrating a story using ethos, pathos, and logos, telling the background and everything. Then finally you confirm it. Confirmation means you give certain logic, certain specific you can say examples to prove it. And then finally refutation and concession. Now you address the opposition. You try to preempt the situation, preempt the question which an opposition can ask or which an opposition can throw against you. So you try to refute them already. And then finally the summation, you give the summary of that specific part. So there are 5 parts of the classical or Aristotelian arguments. Now always remember, ethos, pathos, and logos should always be used in the classical argument in a very comprehensive way. This argument is always considered to be the very best type of argument. Number 8 is Stallman argument. Now what is Stallman argument? Whenever you talk about all other arguments, what happens? Like first of all, you give the premise and then you give the claim. But in this type of argument, you give the claim first and then you provide the premise. Okay, so this is like the most practical type of argument structure basically. 6 interrelated component of analyzing arguments. So according to Stallman, there are 6 interrelated components. Number 1, claim. So in the very beginning, you give the claim. For example, if a person tries to convince a listener that he is a British citizen, the claim would be, I am a British citizen. According to Aristotle, it should have been or it could be the final statement that I am a British citizen because this is the final conclusion. But in this Stallman argument, you are giving it in the very beginning. The conclusion is given in the very beginning. Number 2, the ground fact, evidence or data. So here you try to establish the fact. For example, the person introduced in number 1 can support his claim with the supporting data. I was born in Bermuda. So in the first part, what he said, in the claim part, what he said, I'm a British citizen. Now he is supporting that statement. Why? Because I was born in Bermuda. Number 3, warrant. The statement authorizing movement from ground to claim in order to move from the ground established in number 2. So now what he can say? He can say this thing, a man born in Bermuda will legally be a British citizen. Okay, so now he is trying to support his claim also. So in the first part, he said the claim, I'm a British citizen. Then he gave the reason, because I was born in Bermuda. Now in the third, he's warranting it. A man born in Bermuda will legally be the British citizen. Now number 4 is called backing. Backing must be introduced when the warrant itself is not convincing enough to readers or the listeners. At times it may happen that the warrant is not convincing enough, then you will have to give a more backup. So what type of backup it can be? The person can say this thing in the very beginning, what he said, I am a British citizen because I was born in Bermuda, and every citizen who is in Bermuda is a legal, you can say citizen of British, or a legal British. Then you can say, I trained as a barrister in London, specializing in citizenship. So I know that a man born in Bermuda will legally be a British citizen. Now here is actually trying to establish his credibility that I am a lawyer and I know the rules. And then finally comes the rebuttal and reservation. Now there can be some questions, okay? There can be some sort of rebuttal, some sort of objections from the opposition. So you will have to tackle those opposition in the 5th part or the rebuttal part. A man born in Bermuda will be legally a British citizen unless he is betrayed Britain and has become a spy for another country. So opposition could have made this point. What about that person who has betrayed Britain? Will that also be a British citizen? Now you have already preempted it. So that person or the opposition will not be able to ask you the question. And then finally the qualifier. The qualifier always consists of certain phrases such as probably, possibly, impossibly, certainly, presumably, and all these. So finally the claim can be, I am definitely a British citizen, rather than I am a British citizen presumably. So please try to understand the words which you are utilizing actually holds very important power. So in the Stallman argument, you can find the 3 elements in the beginning, claim, ground, and warrant, are considered as an essential component to the practical argument. Okay, these 3 are considered to be the essential component, while the second triad, qualifier, backing, and rebuttal, can or cannot be the part of any argument. It depends upon the nature of the argument. Then finally comes the Rogerian argument. The Rogerian argument is designed to find the best possible solution based on needs and interest on those involved in the short, some version of consensus. So like I should say, whenever you don't have much time and you want to just convince somebody in a very smallest amount of time and smallest structure, there comes the Rogerian argument, very handy. So when your audience is really difficult one, in the sense that you know your audience is not going to completely agree with your side of the issue, it can be a good idea to try and find the middle ground. The Rogerian argument finds the middle ground. जब आपको ये पता है कि आपके जो ऑडियंस हैं वो आपसे कन्विंस नहीं होने वाले हैं, दे आर वेरी हार्ड ऑडियंस, दे आर वेरी डिफिकल्ट ऑडियंस, Rogerian argument is the most important way. Okay, this type of argument can be extremely persuasive and can help you as a writer speaker understand your own biases and how you might work to find the common ground. So this type of argument work not on the extreme side. ऐसा नहीं है कि वो आपको ही विनर साबित करेगा ये वाला आर्ग्यूमेंट, या फिर सामने वाले व्यक्ति को ही विनर साबित करेगा. ये आर्ग्यूमेंट बेसिकली सेंट्रल ग्राउंड या फिर मिडिल ग्राउंड को पकड़ता है. ठीक है, तो ये दोनों के बीच में एक कंसेंसस या फिर दोनों के बीच में एक कोलैबोरेशन क्रिएट करने की कोशिश करेगा, एक मिडिल ग्राउंड को अचीव करने की कोशिश करेगा. सो व्हाट इज द आर्ग्यूमेंट, व्हाट इज द स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ द रोजरियन आर्ग्यूमेंट? Introduction. First, introduce the problem. Number 2, acknowledgement of the opposition. Try to acknowledge the opposition. Whatever he has to say, try to acknowledge it. Then number 3, state your thesis. Number 4, support your thesis. Now whatever you have stated, now try to support it. Okay, and you should use the statements like work to bring the two sides together. In this supporting the thesis, try to also understand the point of view which your opposition has made. Try to make the combination of both of them and try to come on a common ground. And then finally, conclusion. Try to give a conclusion in such a way that you have considered the point of your audience also, and now you are considering your point also, and then you are actually taking a solution which is best for both of you. Okay, best of both worlds. Theories and methods of effective argumentation. Now this is the final theory of argumentation. If you really want to create a beautiful argument, or you can say very persuasive argument, then pragma dialectics is basically an important method. This is a modern version of dialectic under the name pragma dialectics. Okay, होता क्या है pragma dialectics में? तो अगर आपको बेसिकली एक डायलॉग डिलीवर करना है, तो देयर आर 4 स्टेजेस ऑफ आर्ग्यूमेंटेटिव डायलॉग: कन्फ्रंटेशन स्टेज, ओपनिंग स्टेज, आर्ग्यूमेंटेशन स्टेज एंड कंक्लूडिंग स्टेज. सो सबसे पहले आपको क्या करना होता है? आपको कन्फ्रंट करना होता है. प्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ डिफरेंस ऑफ ओपिनियन सच एज डिबेट, क्वेश्चन और पॉलिटिकल डिसएग्रीमेंट. सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल यू ट्राई टू स्टेट द कन्फ्रंटेशन. अब लाइक you actually try to confront the opposition. Then number 2, opening stage. You open your argument, whatever you want to talk about. Then comes the argumentation stage. somebody from the other side would also create certain sort of questions. There comes the argument. You start arguing about the topic, and then finally concluding stage. So these are the 4 stages in case of pragma dialectics. Now comes the tips and tricks to win an argument. So if you want to win an argument, what can be the different type of do's and don'ts? Number 1 is stay calm. If you lose your temper, you lose. Try to understand. There's an old say, if somebody makes you angry, bow down, he's your boss. It means a person who makes you angry has already got a credit of being your master. So do not let anybody take the temper out of you, and don't lose your temper. Stay calm. Use facts as evidence for your position. If you really want to win an argument, use ethos, pathos, and logos to very comprehensive approach, and only then you would be able to convince or persuade somebody. Ask questions. Do not try to prove yourself intelligent just by not asking questions. Okay, ask as many questions as possible. Only then you would be able to understand the another person. Use logic. Always try to use logic. Do not be illogical. Then appeal to higher values. Whenever you see that okay, some person is not actually understanding you, try to put them in such a situation that they can't say no. For example, you can just simply say, shouldn't we all be working to make the world better and safer for our children? Now this type of situation puts you on a higher ground. You are becoming ethically and morally more you can say positive, then probably nobody can say no. So always appeal to higher values. Then listen carefully. Do not try to speak and only speak. Until and unless you listen to the person, you would not be able to craft the very you can say effective and efficient argument, or you can say efficient claims and warrants, and this will lead you to the failure. Be prepared to concede a good point. Always try to understand it may be possible that the opposition is actually making a relevant and good point, a valid point. Whenever it happens, try to concede to it, appreciate it, but also give a rebuttal against that in a different way if that is valid. Then study your opponent. Always try to study your opponent. If you don't study your opponent, you would not be able to argument with him, or you would not be able to give rebuttals to him. Look for a win-win. Always try to understand there is no solution to an argument. Okay, so you will have to just come to the common ground, a ground which respects the evidences and the warrants given by your opposition and yours too. So in that case, you will always have to come to a common ground, to a common solution. What are the don'ts? Do not get personal. Never ever try to become personal in any sort of argumentation, because argumentation is an official document, you can say dialogue. It should be formal. There should not be any personal discussion. Do not get distracted. If you get distracted by something, probably that is going to lead you to the failure or lead you to the losing the argument. Water down your strong arguments with weak one. Whenever you are having, suppose you are having 3 to 4 arguments, 3 to 4 statements, one is strong and another 2 are weak. Always make the strong agreement in the very formal or in the very first place. Okay, keep the weaker arguments for the later, but a stronger argument should be in the very beginning. Types of discourse. So now there are 4 types of discourse basically: narration, argumentation, description, and exposition. We have already talked about argumentation. Argumentation has already been completed. So now let's talk about all other 3, and then we would be finishing it, and then we would be moving to the critical thinking. That's in the next part. So let's talk about the exposition. What is exposition? The tool known as exposition is designed to inform the audience about the particular topic. So whenever you want to comprehensively explain about a topic, that is called the exposition. There are 7 different expository tools writers and speakers can use, including definition, analysis, compare and contrast, problem and solution, and cause and effect. These are the different expository tools. There are many strengths and weaknesses associated with each type of exposition. There are many strengths and weaknesses associated with each type of exposition, and each type has a completely different purpose. So exposition के जो different tools हैं, उन tools को use करने का सबका अलग-अलग reason होता है. For example, giving someone the definition of a word provides one type of information, whereas comparing and contrasting 2 different opinions paints a different picture. So it depends like what type of environment you are working, what is your objective of speaking and writing. The tools which you would be using depend upon the situation or the objective you are working towards. The exposition type of discourse explains something to your readers. It makes the ideas in the composition clear to them. So whatever you are doing or whatever you are speaking, exposition method actually works on explaining something to the very detail. Further, exposition analyzes the character or a situation. It analyzes the character or the situation means it gives you the in-depth analysis. The example of expositions are those compositions that we can read from most of our magazine articles, editorials, and textbooks. So they all are written in exposition form. Now coming to the description. When people use description, they generally rely on one or more of the 5 human senses to describe something so that it becomes instantly memorable and relatable. It means whenever you are using more number of senses, it becomes very much hooked to your memory. Okay, so in description, the description is made in such a way so that you try to visualize whatsoever you are reading, and apart from that, you would also be feeling that specific information. So that is called description. So whenever you are talking about the stories which you are reading, or whenever you are talking about the plays which you are reading, the novels which you are reading, they are always in a descriptive format. In a descriptive format, they make you visualize things. They make you visualize and visualize yourself into that a specific scenario, and then that's why the stories are always in your mind. You can always tell the story which you actually heard when you was a kid, basically when you were a kid in your schools. So at that time, whatever story you listen to, you can recite it right now also. Why? Because it actually got hooked to your memory. That was in descriptive format. It is usually used to help the audience visualize people and places, but it can also put the audience in a particular mood or create a certain type of atmosphere. The writer or speaker uses nouns and adjectives to give the reader and the listener a sense of what something is like materially. So there are different and special type of adjectives and nouns which are used here. The description type of discourse tries to make the reader realize how you felt in certain circumstances. Okay, so the description will be so detailed that you will start visualizing it and feeling it the way author or speaker actually felt it. It makes your reader to see or hear something like what you yourself heard or saw. Though this type of discourse, you make your reader to have a quality of direct experience, this type of discourse describes what the writer saw or experiences. So it is basically about the detailed experience. Then comes the narration. The main goal of narrative writing or speaking is usually to tell a story, often in an order, to make the audience feel differently about a certain topic. Okay, so try to understand. Whenever you are narrating a story, you are actually telling a story in such an entertaining way that the person really feel related to you. That is called a narration type of discourse. Narratives might take the form of play, novel, folktales, memoir, and myth. A narration type of discourse tells you readers about the certain event. It informs them what happened and how it happened. Okay. Narration type of discourse give your readers, listeners, and the sense of witnessing a certain situation. So it is basically about the story. It is the another type of description, but in a storytelling way. And finally, the type of discourse, argumentation, which we have already discussed. So the argumentation type of discourse make your readers listen or listeners change their mind, their point of view, their attitudes, and their feelings. So argumentation was all about convincing and persuasion. We already discussed. This type of discourse usually makes an appeal to the reader's, listener's logical capability or to their reasoning capability. Okay, so it will give them a food of thought to just consider some situation logically. Furthermore, the argumentation type of discourse appeals to a reader's, listener's emotions. So you would be using argumentation. I already told you would be using Aristotle's 3 important elements of persuasion, components of persuasion, and that was ethos, pathos, and logos. One of the key factors here is the ability of writer speakers to persuade his or her readers with regards to the matter that is being discussed. So persuasion is the major goal in argumentation. Then finally comes the cohesion, coherence, and emphasis. So let's discuss about the cohesion, coherence, and emphasis also. Unity, cohesion, coherence, and emphasis. In general, the division of piece of writing into paragraphs should make it easier for reader to understand what or he is reading, improves comprehension. So whenever you are reading a paragraph, you always read statement by statement, and every statement should combine a meaning so that you can actually analyze or conclude the complete meaning of the paragraph. A paragraph is a group of sentences developing one topic. So one topic is divided into different statements, and all these statements combined together create the topic or makes the topic complete. The high school English argumentative paragraph tends to have about 10 sentences arranged according to the following structure. So if you talk about an argument, it will always be arranged in this structure, which we have already discussed. Topic sentence, which will be the main statement. Expansion and clarification, the first reason and evidence, second reason and evidence, and then finally the conclusion. So this is basically the argumentation structure. Now, The topic statement should make clear what exactly is being discussed. It is a brief statement about the subject of the paragraph. However, in narrative or descriptive paragraphs, the topic statements is often omitted. So this is just very much irrelevant at this point. You need to understand the topic statement is just a basic statement. Expressing the main idea in a paragraph or explanation or argument in the first sentence and using the topic sentence as a foundation on which to build the paragraph. So topic sentence is the sentence which gives the basic idea and then you start building upon it. Remember that a narrow topic sentence is generally better than the broader one. जितना छोटा होगा आपका topic sentence या initial जो level है वो उतना ही अच्छा होगा. Then unity. Unity means oneness. So a paragraph has unity of thoughts if it sticks to one subject. It means always remember whenever you are speaking or whenever you are reading, always try to give only one thought in different paragraphs. So if you are speaking about one topic, speak about only that topic. Okay, one paragraph should represent only one type of information, not a complete amalgamation of different type of informations. If a paragraph is unified, it can be summed up in one sentence. What is the identification of unity? If a paragraph is unified, it can be summarized in only one sentence. One sentence can give the summary of the paragraph. Then comes the coherence and cohesion. Coherence means hanging together. It means which requires both the proper arrangement of ideas and bridging the gap between sentences with connectives that show the exact relationship of part to part. So try to understand. Coherence means when your sentences actually glue to each other and they finally give a complete meaning. Okay, coherence is defined as the quality of being logical, consistent and able to understood. Imagine coherence as a building. It's an analogy. What means that if you're talking about the coherence means suppose like you need to make a building. In order to make a building, you need to put the bricks and the cement in a proper order. That putting the bricks and cement in a proper order is known as cohesion. So if you have cohesion between your sentences, if you have cohesion between your ideas, finally they will represent a coherence in the complete paragraph. So if your bricks and cement are kept in perfect order, laid in perfect order, then probably your building will be perfect. Or if you take care of the cohesion, the coherence will take care for itself. Okay. Bricks and cement can be put together. I've already given the example. A text will be cohesive if the cohesive ties are used. However, it will only be coherent if the cohesive ties are used appropriately to create meaning. So cohesive ties means there are certain specific vocabulary or certain specific words which should be used to become cohesive. If you are becoming cohesive in a proper order appropriately to create a perfect meaning, only then you can become coherent. You can have cohesion without coherence, but you cannot have coherence without cohesion. It means you can lay the bricks in any order, but ultimately building will be made when these are kept in perfect order. So if you talk about a building will always consist of brick and mortar, but every brick and mortar connected in different orders cannot constitute a building. In the same way, you can have cohesion without coherence, but you cannot have coherence without cohesion. Okay? Cohesive ideas effectively help the discourse flow. If your ideas are very much cohesive in nature, one idea gives birth to another idea, then another idea, then another idea. This is called cohesiveness. These devices include, what are the devices of cohesion? Collocations, lexical repetition, linking adverbials, substitution, ellipses, conjunctions, synonym antonyms, hyponyms, and referencing, for example, anaphoric, cataphoric, and deictic. These devices create physical links between the words of a discourse. Coherence can be achieved through devices such as cohesive ties, formatting techniques, inference, logical ordering of information, semantic pattern, and consistency. These topics might seem a little bit difficult to all of you, but you need to understand only those things which are very much relevant to you. Okay, I have just given the brief or you can say brief but also very detailed information in order to make you guys very much clear what these ideas are all about. So these all enhance the ability to the text to be successfully interpreted and understood. So always remember, whenever you are speaking or whenever you are reading something or whenever you are writing something, the cohesion and coherence are very, very important. How to achieve cohesion? How can you achieve cohesion? You can achieve cohesion by repeating words, reference words, transition signals, substitution, and ellipsis. Let's try to have a look at them, what they are. Repeated word means, suppose read this example. Cohesion is an important feature of academic writing. So here you have used the word writing. Now in the next sentence, you will use the word writing again to just give a reference to it. It can help ensure that your writing coheres or sticks together, which will make it easier for the reader to follow your essay or report. Now this essay and report will be used another time in the next sentence. You can achieve good cohesion by paying. So cohesion word is used here. Cohesion word has been used already. 5 important features. Now what are the features? The first of these repeated words, second key feature. Feature is the another feature is used another time. So you are repeating the word. So this is how the cohesion can be achieved in one way. Reference words used to refer something which is mentioned elsewhere in the text, usually in the preceding sentence. Okay. So for example, read the word cohesion is read the example once again. Cohesion is an important feature of academic writing. So it is used for cohesion. So these are the pronouns which are used as a reference words. So these can also create cohesion. Then transition signals. Transition signals means whenever you are speaking, always try to use these transition signals. For example, like these are the 4 transition signals. You can say, for example, in contrast, first, as a result, like that. So in the example also you can find first and third and second. All these are used. Then comes substitution. Substitution means using one or more word to replace for one or more words used earlier in the text. For example, just read the example. Drinking alcohol before driving is illegal in many countries since doing so. So doing so is used for drinking alcohol. So here drinking alcohol is basically substituted by doing so. That is called the substitution. Then finally, ellipsis. Ellipsis is something like when you are omitting a certain word without even referring to it. So leaving out one or more word without the meaning, because the meaning is already clear from the context. So now read the whole example, and in the final sentence, the fourth is substitution. So just read it from here. The second key feature is reference words. The third one is the transition signals, and the fourth is substitution. Now what is fourth? The fourth key is substitution, but you have omitted the key because it is already understood by the context. That is called ellipsis. So arrangement, what is the meaning of arrangement? There are several standard ways to arrange a paragraph: temporally, spatially, logically. Temporally means time order, which is the best for dealing how something happened. So it is also known as chronologically. And then comes the spatially, space order, which is the best for describing a scene. So space order means you can just like whenever you read novels and stories, they are always arranged in spatial order. And then comes the logically, known to unknown, general to specific, past to present, least to most important, and all these. If you are just like going in that specific order, that is called the logical one. Then finally comes the connectiveness. What is connectiveness? The progression of each sentence from the preceding sentence must be logical, and it should also be clear and unmistakable. So there are certain word bridges which are used to connect the sentences. So useful bridges include the following: this, that, these, those, personal pronouns, repeated nouns, conjunctions, adverbs, and connective phrases. So what are other purposes and examples of transitions? To add idea. If you want to add the idea, you can use connectives. To introduce a statement, to show time relation, to indicate order. So these are the different words which you can use to indicate consequences, to indicate repetition of idea, to compare, and all this. And then finally comes the emphasis. What is emphasis? Make sure that significant matters stand out and unimportant details stay in the background. Usually we place important ideas at the beginning and end because first impressions are lasting and end is the longest remembered. Always remember, whenever you are presenting an information, make sure that you are emphasizing upon the important information. If everything is important, then nothing is important. Okay, so please try to understand important information should be highlighted. How you can highlight the important information? There are different ways. A forceful introduction. You can always give a forceful introduction. Effective conclusion. The conclusion can be effective by using certain quotes, poems, or whatever sort of things. Purposeful repetition. If you want to emphasize upon an idea, purposefully repeat it as many times as possible. Examples and illustrations. Give as many examples and illustrations as possible. Comparison and contrast. Try to compare and try to contrast between two situations. So these were some important devices which can be used to make emphasis. So that's all, my dear students. Although this topic was a little bit complicated, rather I should say a bit, you can say, off the mark, But yes, because this topic was introduced in your syllabus, so I tried to give the maximum possible efforts in order to explain this topic in a comprehensive way. I hope it can help you out in like understanding the concept, the difficult concept, in a easy way. So like if there is any question or any doubt, you can definitely ask me through the comment box or through the WhatsApp and the Telegram channel. The link of the WhatsApp and the Telegram channel are already given in the description box. So if you like the video, please do try to just share it and subscribe it. Do try to share it with your friends and also ask them to subscribe the channel so that we can also get an encouragement to keep posting more videos. And don't worry guys, I know that your exams are just about to start from 24th, so I would be just like completing the entire syllabus within this week only. So you don't need to worry about anything. Keep moving, keep studying, all the best for your examination, and keep working hard. See you in the next video.